Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. With me is Sharad Kutan. Let's continue our look at why more than 500 refugees made a bitter escape from an immigration department detention center in Sungai Bakap, Penang last week. Let's speak now to K. Sudagaran Stanley. He is one of the co-founders of the LifeBridge Learning Center, which is a school that provides free education to refugee children. Stanley, let's talk about what the breakout at the Sungai Bakap Immigration Depot signals to you. I'm wondering what you would like the public to understand about this incident that perhaps may be missing from the official narrative.
Thanks, Melissa, and Sharat for having me on the show once again. I think this is a very important issue that we need to discuss. And I think even before we talk about the detention center, we must understand the reason that many of them are actually here today in Malaysia. Right now, as we are speaking, Melissa and Sharat, there are wars or there are conflicts happening in Myanmar, in different villages, in different cities. Villages are being burned, artilleries are being fired, airstrikes are coming down, and there are women and children being killed, raped, and so on. As we are speaking, this is happening because this is an ongoing conflict that is still happening in Myanmar today at this point of time. So these people are humans that are trying to run away from conflict, trying to save their lives, and they cross border into Thailand, into Indonesia, and some of them will end up in Malaysia as well. So they come here in hope of wanting to actually secure themselves and keep themselves safe. Now, in the very first instance, the arrest of these 500 over refugees in itself raises a lot of questions. I mean, why do we arrest people who are coming here in search of a refuge? You know, they're seeking for help and they need our help for protection and so on, but we arrest them. And what is more alarming is that we have learned from the various press reports and the statements that were released by ministers and the police that these refugees have been in detention for almost more than 2 years. And the most troubling part is that without access to UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Now, as a refugee, you know, or as a human, you have been in detention for almost 2 years in a detention center. You have no representation to legal means. You have no contact with the UN. You are basically like under ISA or an EO law. You know, you do not know when you're going to be released. You've been in for 2 years. You do not know what's your future going to be like, how many years more you're going to be in detention, and the conditions of prison. We all know it's a fact, you know, that the conditions in detention centers are horrible living conditions. I have been to these detention centers many years ago to provide medical aid services to migrant workers and refugees. I've seen how the detention centers are inside. And, you know, a lot of mental health issues that they go through, having been there for 2 years, and the conditions inside. And some of these issues might have forced them to actually run out from this detention centers. We do not know.
Right. So Stanley, in fact, the question is probably best put to them if they ever find a voice in the mainstream media. I mean, why they did exactly what they did, and despair is probably driving them. I want to ask you though, when you look at Malaysia's treatment of asylum seekers, refugees, people coming from conflict areas, how do we compare to our regional neighbors? I mean, the Rohingya problem is a very long-standing one. We're talking decades. Yeah. Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, all, including Bangladesh, are recipients of Rohingya refugees. Have we changed the way we treat them over the decades? Do we compare favorably or unfavorably to how our neighbors treat them?
I think to say that we are completely, abusing or having ill treatment towards refugees would be a misstatement, because to some extent we have allowed refugees to be in our country. They have been working and they have been here for quite some time. But the fact is that there is no a proper legal surrounding to actually govern the way that we actually treat them. So this enables, for example, certain abuses to happen because they're not allowed to work. So when they're not allowed to work, then their wages and their protection from the Employment Act and so on does not apply to them. So sometimes they're not paid. We have handled cases before of refugees not being paid and so on. They have no access to education. That's the reason why we even started the school, and many other NGOs are giving them education as well in Malaysia. Healthcare services is something that they have to pay double or triple the prices if they go to a government hospital, and many other issues as well. So, when we're talking about refugees in Malaysia, we're not only talking about the Rohingya refugees. I think there are around 180,000 registered refugees in Malaysia. This is UNHCR statistics. And out of this 180, there were 150 from Myanmar. And out of the 150,000, we're talking about 80% of these people from Myanmar are the Rohingya ethnics. And the different ethnics are from Chin and different villages in Myanmar and so on. So there is a large number also from different ethnics, and also a small number from Palestine, Syria, Afghanistan, and different conflicts.
Okay, so we seem to have this very this policy on refugees. It doesn't seem to make sense, and sometimes perhaps the language and the framing from immigration authorities has been quite xenophobic, anti-refugee. But how does anyone benefit from mass detentions of refugees?
Exactly, and why are we even detaining them? These are resources that we have in our country, and that is why, if you see, I have called for, actually many people in fact are calling for refugees to be allowed to work legally in the country, and we don't have to hire and go and sign an MOU with Bangladesh and and all this recruitment hassle, process hassle and so on. We already have ready manpower in this country. So many of them are not allowed to work. Why not give them permits? Allow them to work. Okay, even if we do not want to ratify the 1951 Convention on Refugee Rights, due to many reasons, they are afraid of opening up the floodgates and so on. But at least we can provide proper humanitarian reliefs to those that are already here in this country.
Stanley, I want to ask you this though. We seem to create a system in which people become vulnerable, or vulnerable people remain vulnerable. But vulnerability is perhaps something that can be used by certain groups. Somebody's vulnerability is an opportunity for exploitation. I mean, that's exactly, I think, at the core of this. We allow vulnerability to in some ways, to allow exploitation. Would you agree?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, especially political parties, when it suits them, you see, I think 1 year ago, I remember, there were certain politicians that went on to stage and shouting Rohingya rights, and we're going to protect them, and, we want them, we give them proper rights and so on. And then this year we hear of them being in detention center for almost 2 years. And then, they are running out and dying in accident and so on. So this is very sad because certain politicians in this country are actually making use of the situation to actually gain political mileage and so on. But in fact, when they are part of the government, they could actually make proper policies to actually address some of the issues that they are facing in this country.
Right.
So that's very sad,
Stanley, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us on the show today. That was anti-corruption and human rights activists K. Sudhakar and Stanley. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned.